We, as a society, have witnessed such events as Rodney King when he was brutalized and beaten by the LA officers back in 1991, and again with George Floyd's death when an officer kneeled on his neck, which resulted in his death. By examining police brutality in America, we can discover there is a need to put more emphasis on police brutality within excessive use of force for minor infractions, which a layer of audience may not see. This is important because of the related topic of noble causes, corruption in which infractions by police officers are deemed okay because they were done against criminals. This podcast will go through different ethnic groups to raise awareness about police.
I do, and here's my theory on that. I think we can all agree that there is systematic racism within the larger society, and so I think it probably shouldn't be a surprise when you recruit police officers from the general society that some of those same trends are going to show themselves in the police force. And so I think just like I think it would be naive to say that there's no racism in the United States. I think it's equally naive to think that there's just because someone becomes a police officer that if they had some racist tendencies before that those would somehow just disappear. And I think the fact that police officers do have immunity under the law from making mistakes, I think that those who have some of those tendencies, it can get exacerbated because they're in a position of power and often in a position where it's hard to hold them accountable.
Right. Do you believe in the abuse of powers? Ever since, like, let's say you're an officer yourself, right? Would you yourself abuse that power in order for you to get what you basically want out of a criminal or a person?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that I don't, but I think that there's a quote that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think that it's easy to fall into that trap where you do have a power dynamic where the police officer has a lot more power, and I think some people I think it's also complicated. So I think depending on what you work on, if you're a criminal investigator and maybe you investigate murders as a living, or you investigate sexual crimes, and so you've seen you've seen victims who have been really harmed, I think there's a desire to maybe try to like put people away behind bars, and as you mentioned earlier, thinking that maybe the ends justify the means. And I think that's challenging because not everyone that comes in is going to be guilty, and I think sometimes people think maybe they're doing the right thing, but aren't necessarily. And I think the challenge is that even if it works 95% of the time, you're still going to have 5% of people who are innocent who can get treated or mistreated, and and that has a lot of negative effects for society.
Right. I agree with you on that part too. So here's